Hello, everybody. It's Donna Cravata, and we are live again with another Real 50 Over 50 interview. And this week we have Dr. Nancy Zare. She's a certified sales trainer, sales psychologist, the sales whisperer, and the author of 6 books. Nancy helps service based business owners adjust their communication style to match how their prospects make buying decisions. She calls this a likability system. It's a 5 step process that's based on the platinum rule. It builds rapport quickly and authentically with your prospects, builds trust, and converts them into clients. Welcome, Nancy. I'm so happy to have you here today. It's
Oh,
lovely
I'm
to see you.
excited. Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here, Donna. And as I was listening to the introduction, I thought, I think you tell people more about what I do than I've told people what I do. So this was great.
Well, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to shout it from the virtual rooftops.
And I'm the
I
whisperer.
I really believe that this group of women that I've pulled together need to be more known. So I'm happy to share, and I'm happy to amplify your voice any way that I can. And
Thank you.
let's just dive in. So let's just start with what happened when you turned 50.
You know, I remember my 50th birthday. I was overseas in Sweden, where I was teaching in a master's program for uh, Swedish residents. The program was Springfield College in Springfield, Massachusetts, so it was a US based program. And we did this 16-month intensive master's program. Well, it turns out that Europeans, or particularly the Swedish people, they love the 50th birthday. It is celebrated to the hilt. So when they found out that I literally was having my birthday during that time period, I mean, I was lavished with a birthday party. So I remember that very, very well.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So those of you who are not yet 50, that's the place to go to celebrate.
That sounds amazing. But what happened to you? Like, did you change?
Well, you know, maybe not exactly then, but 50 does feel like, or I don't know if it felt that way, but intellectually, I said to myself, well, is that the halfway mark in a lifespan? You know, we think of maybe reaching 100 as somehow the time period that we have. So there was a sense of, have I now moved to the place where I have less time left than I thought?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think it changes one's thinking, but at the same time, I didn't feel any different, Donna.
Mm.
And I felt, you know, like I was in my prime. And I think that's true. I think they call it menopausal zest.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I really like. I'm not a big demographics person, and
Yeah,
I'm sure you're not either,
yeah.
because we base everything that we do on values. But it's something happens when you turn 50. It's like I think a lot of it is what you say is like there's more time behind you than in front of you, and you've got things to do. And when you're creative and curious and adventurous and have a quest for learning, I mean, there's just a lot to get done.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because not long after that, I don't know how many years, I made a decision to, even though it was a tenured teaching position, I left and became an entrepreneur and founded Rapport Builders, which is my business where I am today.
And that's great. So you've been doing that for a while now too. Um, so let's dig into some of this work that you do. Let's start with what about those hats? I
Well,
love hats.
as you know, I do have a few hats. I didn't wear
Uh-huh.
the red one because it kind of clashes with my current outfit. And people always ask me, you know, how do I know which one to wear? It has to do with my outfit, but it also has to do with the symbolism of the colors. And
Yeah.
this represents a heart of gold. And of
Mhm.
course, the 50 over 50,
Mhm.
the real women who are 50 over 50 is all about bringing our wisdom, yes, but bringing our hearts, you know, bringing the fact that we are mission driven and passionate, and we do have a message that we want to give the world, and that we want to make the place a better place than when we found it.
There's a definite legacy component.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so the gold hat today represents a heart of gold. And that's why I chose it, and I know I look good in red. So there now you know the secret behind my wardrobe choices today.
All right, but there's more to those hats too, because don't they align with the ideal buyer personas that you work with? Let's talk a little bit about a likability and the ideal buyer persona, and also the major the four major personalities that you talk about as far as a sales process, a sales journey.
So you're right. Entrepreneurs wear many hats, and the hat that is usually the one they find most troublesome is sales. As a matter of fact, most people who identify with their occupation do not think of themselves as being salespeople. And hence, there's a rejection of selling, almost like it's beneath us. I have a PhD. Is
Mhm.
selling beneath me? Aren't I somehow have more status than being a salesperson? I mean, what training do you need to be sales? Anyone could do sales. So there's a lot of stuff going on around that. The likability system is to help people create a feeling of being alike within the other person. And that's why I've coined the term likability. It's not a popularity contest. It's really about saying the words and behaving in a manner that the other person says to themselves, wow, you get me, we're alike. And hence, when you create that feeling of a likability within the prospect, or it could be your spouse or a partner or someone else, the other person relaxes, the trust builds, the sales resistance drops away, and that opens the door to doing business together. And there are 5 steps to achieve a likability, but that in a nutshell is what it's all about.
Yeah, that's exactly how I operate too. There is no sales process. It's just like, I need to have this done. Why would I not hire you?
Yeah, exactly. And so, a likability, as I said, the 5 steps, and it starts with the fact that there are 4 different ways people make buying decisions. And I specifically have created a system. And by the way, there are over 200 personality systems. Many people are familiar with DISC. There's the Wilcox learning system. There is colors, animals, objects, words. I use numbers, and these numbers come from how many touch points someone needs in order to make a buying decision. Now, there's been a lot of research done lately about the fact that with digital marketing and the fact that we're not really communicating in real time, that more and more touch points are needed for someone to be able to decide, shall we work together? But the research that actually my colleague did, Mary Peckus, and this is back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. She started the first virtual telemarketing company, had 11 different people. Well, they discovered that there are, like I said, different numbers of contacts needed before that prospect could make a decision, yes or no. Either way, didn't matter. And so the numbers that she used were 1, 3, 5, and 7. I've adjusted those to the digital era as 2, 4, 6, and 8. And I've added an extra contact because of the fact that we're not connecting in real time. So many
Mm,
of our contacts are through emails and messaging
wow.
when we don't know whether the person has even opened it, let alone read it or absorbed it.
Mhm.
Whereas in real time, even if we're separated as you and I are right now through geography, but in real time, we can clarify with each other. Well, what do you mean?
Mhm.
I didn't get it. Or you can see the frown on my face or whatever, and therefore probe farther as to whether or not there is true, genuine communication.
That's amazing. So, can you explain a little about what these personalities are and what the numbers mean?
So the number 2 buyer, as you can imagine, it was initially 1. They basically make a decision the first time they talk with you. It's one and done. And this is someone who's quick, decisive, Clearly, they're results oriented. They want it off their table. They take action, and hence they are looking for possibilities, opportunities. They're risk takers, very flexible, jump right in to,
Mhm.
that's your number one, or now I label it a number two buyer. And if you know that you're dealing with that number two buyer, you need to ask now, right
Mhm.
now, whether they're ready to do business. Because if you don't, I promise they will do business with someone else the next minute.
Yeah.
Because it's like the change in your pocket. Your fingers are burning and you want to spend, spend, spend. The number four buyer, which is what the gold hat represents, is someone who is heart centered, and they're looking for a relationship. Now they're fairly quick in making up their minds. They're taking only 2 or 3 contacts. But Donna, they go back and they rethink what happened just now. Was it genuine? Was it real? Did the person really care about me? Or is this kind of a transaction? Because this person is very sensitive about being treated as a transaction. And
Mhm.
hence they do a lot of self-reflection, and they need one more contact after they've said yes to
Mhm.
confirm that I'm so happy we're working together. And it's about you, not the fact that, you're lavishing me with money.
Yeah.
That's our number 4. Our number 6 is the person who is looking up the testimonies and references and reading a proposal and looking at the details and wanting proof, social proof, that what you say and do will indeed be fulfilled. And so it takes time for them to go back and gather this information, talk to others, hear from their network. Hence, that's why they're slower in making up their mind. And notice they have a more formal process that they're following, because this person wants sequence. They want the details. They want the logistics. They're very budget sensitive. So it needs to fit within their framework. So that this is a person with a plan and an agenda.
Mhm.
And then finally, our number 8, and I always say, put the 8 on its side. It's the symbol for infinity. This is the person who starts with 8 contacts and goes forever, because they're asking questions. They want to learn. They need information, not the information of the number 6. That's hearsay.
Mhm.
No, they want scientific evidence,
Mhm.
and they want explanations and reason and logic as to why this service is good. And they're looking for a return on their investment, the value over time.
Mhm.
Very
And
different buyers.
yeah, and how does this translate into, like, the real world? Like, how do you create your content and your marketing materials to speak to these people? Do you prefer to work with one type of person, or are you creating avenues for all of them to find value in what you're providing?
Great, great question, because it turns out that most of us really prefer to work with one or two of these personality styles, not all 4.
Mhm.
And unless we're selling widgets and gadgets, generally speaking, and even the widget and gadget, by the way, could be made to appeal to one or more of those styles, but not usually all. And so advertisers really do think about who is that ideal buyer out there that they're trying to appeal to. Well, we need to be just that smart, because let's face it, there are people that we have worked with who were a pain in the neck, and they drove us crazy, and they did not bring us joy and fulfillment. That style is one to be avoided. Whereas there are other people, and I think you even mentioned earlier when we were talking, you just hit it off naturally with
Yeah.
certain people, and you just could talk forever to them because there is a likability. There's this instant connection. Well, you want more of those and less of the others.
Yeah.
And if you know what that style is, 2, 4, 6, 8, or a combination of the 2, 4, the 4, 6, etc., why not go after them?
Yeah.
Hence, there are certain words, Donna, and word phrases, as well as techniques that are more suitable to each of the styles.
Mhm.
So the number 8 style, which I mentioned, wants information. They're readers. Give them websites, give them books, give them articles, give them substance for them to dive into. And hence the drip on them,
Mhm.
by giving them information over time. Whereas that number 4, who is represented so well in our community of 50
Mhm.
over 50.
Yeah.
This is a person who we want this face-to-face real time.
Right.
Hence the roundtables that you organize and give us an opportunity to talk with one another. That connection is where it's at. We want to feel connected to each other in a personal way. And it doesn't have to be physically in the same place, although that's great. But those cold emails and those cold DMs,
Mhm.
direct messages, are not where it's at for us.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. It's not. And it's so interesting when you really start to dial this in and understand and listen, because I operate the same way. And it's like somebody just like, opened the curtains, right? Like you could see this whole other world that you couldn't see before. And when I work with people and show them like what's available to them if they just look the right way or look in the right places, it's just so amazing to see their reaction because they didn't see it before. It was all right there. Like it didn't just appear, but they just didn't see it because they were looking at something else. And it's just, it makes everything so much easier.
Yeah. It's interesting you said that, they just see it and it was right there, but they hadn't noticed. And I think a lot of times that's what a good coach or consultant really does,
Yeah.
is we see the obvious, but you haven't seen it. Like the emperor has no clothes, or the
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz is really a frightened person themselves. But again, we have it within us. It's not outside, and yet we're seeking madly outside to find this thing.
Exactly, exactly. And for me, like I didn't have any like formal training or education in any of this. I went to work when I was 16 and I worked. So everything was just work. And when I started my own business, I didn't realize that I had this gift that most people didn't have. And I just assumed everybody saw what I saw. And it took me a long time of working with the wrong people, which was incredibly frustrating because, like, I was like, "Why can't you see this?" And then they would go, like, do something that was the total opposite, and I'd be like, "Why are you doing that?" And, it took me a while to realize that it was me, that I was special, that I had something special, and that I can share this with other people, but, like, it was the whole thing, the irony of the whole thing was I'm trying to show people what they can't see, and I couldn't see what was my gift. And when that all aligned, it was just, it was magic.
Yeah, I think that's exactly been my experience too. When I was 10 years old, I had a very pivotal moment in my life. I didn't know it at that moment. I now know it in retrospect, looking back. And that moment is when I worked with my parents. My parents, they didn't get along, and it was a very stormy household. And so when I say I worked with them, I had this gift of communication right from the get-go. And at that point, I sat them down and I listened to whatever the latest argument was about. Both were present, but I didn't let the other one interrupt. So I just heard dad, and then I just heard mom, but they both were present, hearing, the story being told. And I, the child, translated and told my dad, do this so mom will feel loved. And I told my mom, do this so dad is respected. And
Hmm.
notice the words changed,
Yeah.
because mom needed love, and she needed love in a particular way, which my father seemed to be ignorant of what that was, what she was saying, even
Mhm.
though she was screaming it.
That's
And
because
this,
it's because she was screaming it.
possibly, but it escalates, right? And then, mom couldn't figure out what dad needed,
Yeah.
and so they kept butting heads. And what I realized is that they were two different personality styles
Yeah.
butting heads. And I often do that illustration because and like I say, it was a pivotal moment, and I didn't know I was gifted. You mentioned that we make assumptions. I assume people were hearing each other.
Mhm.
Hey, Stephanie, I'm
Hey,
glad you're here.
welcome.
I assume people could hear what the other person is saying, but no, I had to translate. And so, Donna, that's what the likability system is about.
Mhm.
Listen to the other person, identify their style, and now speak the words. You're not changing your style. You're simply adding words to your vocabulary that are words that they're going to understand naturally. So
Yes.
that the result is, wow, you get me, we're alike.
And they feel comfortable, and
Mhm,
trust builds,
mhm.
and relationships, and then
And
it
that's really what it's about is,
absolutely.
enhancing relationships. People ask me how I got to be a sales coach, trainer, whatever word you want to use for me. And I'll be candid, I am not a maven when it comes to selling. It's
Mhm,
not like I am some outstanding superstar. I'm not. What I am, though, is a communicator. And when my coach worked with me, this was when I first started my business, she basically said, people aren't going to pay for communication. Well, maybe not, but they will pay for sales skills. And so she steered me to use this communication skill set to help people with selling.
mhm.
Um, and I mean, and what's interesting, I find, is that my ideal person actually doesn't think of themselves as selling. They don't want to sell.
No.
Sell is a four-letter word, and it connotes that used car salesman that is slimy and manipulative and
Mhm.
unethical. So my person, no way they want to think of themselves as doing selling. So they run to marketing,
Yeah.
hoping that the marketing will do the heavy lifting of the selling, which is the reason why I like to connect with people in the marketing world,
Mhm.
because that's where my client is going. And yet
Yeah.
then they'll point the finger back at the marketing people. You failed me because the leads don't convert. Well, they don't convert because you haven't built the relationship and you haven't learned to sell.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the relationship piece, is so critical, and it's so often overlooked, as is the listening piece. I always say that listening is the least utilized marketing skill that we have. And when you listen first, then you know exactly what you have to do.
It's so true because
And
your
it's so
prospect will
simple.
actually tell you.
Yes.
And by the way, it doesn't have to be a prospect. It could be, a family
Exactly.
member. It could be a
Yeah, it could
colleague.
be anything.
That's
It
right.
could be
Listen
anything.
to them. What happens is we often are listening with the idea of what I'm going to say next, or
Yes.
we're listening in a defensive posture, like I'm being accused and I need to, straighten the record and make sure people know who and what I am. This kind of listening doesn't work.
No, no, it doesn't. It's because people aren't hearing you. They're
Yeah.
not it just becomes noise, and it adds to the noise, and there's already too much noise. And, like, when AI came out, I had, I kind of, like, crawled into a cave for a bit because I wanted to figure out, like, what my stance was on AI, because I really believe that you have to have this relationship. You can't give this relationship over to a bot to do for you. And where is the line, like where it needs to be human and where you can leverage these tools and be the one that drives them, not allowing them to drive you. And it comes down to the listening and the relationship.
Yeah. And of course, if we program AI incorrectly or we don't program it at all, guess what? You're going to get what you put in is what you get out. You know,
Yeah, and being off just a hair
I know, I know.
could be like really bad.
I I'm a member of 12-step recovery, and I have a lot of sponsees that I work with, and I often give them the analogy of a compass.
Mhm,
A compass heading is supposed to go due north, but if you're 1 degree off, the closer you are to where the two hands connect, you don't see that there's any kind of separation, but the
mhm,
farther you go, the more separation is obvious. So that 1 degree gets worse and worse and worse.
mhm.
So if you're 1 degree off,
Yeah,
it compounds itself and it can only get worse over time.
yeah, you're not gonna go where you think you are.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
which reminds me that, according to what I've heard, airplanes or when you fly from, say, New York to Los Angeles, that plane is off course 90% of the time. Obviously, we do start at one destination and get to the
mhm,
next, but that's because there's constant correction going on. Hence,
mhm,
that's what the pilot should be doing. Hence,
yeah,
we need to
yes,
take in the feedback and
mhm,
recognize that we may be off.
yeah, course correction.
Mhm.
And it's, as everything gets faster and faster, I think that we need to be more rooted in the things that don't change,
Yeah.
like building relationships, listening, understanding your own stories, really deeply understanding who your audience is. And like you mentioned a bit ago, that it's not just a prospect or a client. That audience is an enormous group of people. Like I'm working with a client now who had this big tool list that she uses, and she had it in an opt-in, like a free giveaway for an opt-in. And I was like, that needs to be a page on your website. Because, there was so much value with moving that from something that's a static document into an interactive page on your website where these vendors could all see that you're recommending them and anybody could access it. And, you're now a resource and you're generous and you've got, knowledge in all of these tools. And, she went on and on about how she used them. I said, just take all this and copy and paste it right on a web page.
Well, it's another illustration of what you said a moment ago, Donna, about, the obvious, that
Yeah.
sometimes we need that third party, that outsider, to be able to see what we don't see.
Mhm. Yeah, and she was viewing it totally differently. She was viewing it as, like insider secrets, but it's like, no, this is a great opportunity to show like you can use all of these tools and there are options, and building relationships with these vendors and the tools that you're using because
Yeah.
that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how, again, we may not recognize our own value.
Yeah.
I did a workshop not so long ago to help my clients with pricing. As you
Mhm.
can imagine, for a consultant, a coach, someone in that arena, setting a price is it's challenging. What do I charge? Obviously, I need to pay my bills. I need to charge a reasonable rate. And so you look at what other people are charging and you kind of come up with a figure, but then you doubt yourself and so forth. Well, this was a workshop to help people own their value. And as a result, everyone walked out of that workshop with an increased rates that they were charging because they had never recognized or seen their value. But when the group of us sat around and shared with each other the value of each person's offering, all of a sudden, and I wrote it on a whiteboard. It filled the whiteboard. There were 3 panels of whiteboard, big industrial whiteboards. It filled those panels with their values. I mean, who could not say to themselves, holy moly, I am worth a heck of a lot more.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing because we just do what we do.
Yeah,
And,
we do.
we most of the time we're doing it alone.
Yes, that's right. For many of us who are, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, we are working by ourselves, even if we have a team of maybe virtual assistants or administrative people. Who's out in front of the pack? We are, hence it's lonely.
Yeah.
Who do we get to talk with and run by these ideas or even hear that, what our value is?
Yeah. Yeah, and we forget, and we also tend to focus on we could do 100 things in a day, but that one thing we didn't get done is the thing we focus on, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of when, I did a lot of public speaking, and right now I do more podcasting than public speaking. But, you'd send out an evaluation in your audience, and there would be, 99, you were outstanding. And the one, well, you could have done this better.
The one that was wearing the color hat you didn't want anyway.
Yeah, probably. In fact, I'll tell you how the hats came to be. People often ask me about that, and because I was public speaking, I used to talk about look through the lens of your prospect, and I had colored lenses.
Mhm.
Well, it turns out that I'm 5 foot. Colored lenses, when you're standing in the audience, you're not being seen. The hat, it gives you some height. And it's a bigger piece of color. It stands out.
Yeah,
And
it's a
so
thing.
that is, and I love using props, by the way.
Mhm.
To me, I guess I'm a visual person. And so I'm always thinking of how to illustrate or convey my message with images and not just the words.
That's amazing. So I cannot believe that we are already at 30 minutes, but
Holy moly.
I like to end these with, asking all of the guests to share a wisdom bomb, something that you'd like to leave people with, something, maybe something actionable that they can do, whatever you feel you want to share.
Actionable, love yourself. That is the message I want to share. We just were talking about value and how easy it is for us to discount, oversee, neglect our value. You can't love yourself without really owning your value. And loving yourself is where it's all about. Most of us, especially as women, we've been trained and socialized to give to others and to make it all about the other person, and we do. I mean, I've done that, been a caretaker and so forth, always putting the other person's needs first. But the example of the aircraft, where the oxygen mask, you need to put on yours before you can put on someone else's. It's so true. So
Yeah.
it has to start here. It starts within. It isn't outside. I know I've scurried around looking for outside validation and outside affirmations and confirmations that I've got value or whatever. No, self-love starts here. And for me, Donna, it came from really connecting with a higher power and recognizing that energy source that loves me unconditionally, and because I feel kind of tuned in and wired into that source, that higher power, that's where my self love comes. It doesn't come, and believe me, I did seek it in many ways,
Mhm.
many external ways. I was seeking validation and love, but it's from within.
It is. We have all our own answers.
Yeah.
We really do. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Well, this has been an absolute delight. And please, everybody, connect with Nancy. And if you're watching on the replay, because we get a lot of people that come to the replays, leave comments, tag us. Nancy's very active on social, so am I. We'll keep this conversation going. And it's just absolute pleasure to spend time with you today, Nancy.
Yeah. To your sales success.
Yes, that sounds good to me. Have a great Wednesday, everybody. We will be back next week with another interview and a wisdom panel.